So today, and hopefully in a few subsequent videos, I wanted to take a look at some of the few books I own and maybe just provide a quick review of some of them. Reading is unfortunately becoming something of a lost art, at least amongst the youths around where I live. When I was a teacher, I tried to make it imperative amongst the kids to make reading part of their daily habits or weekly habits at the very least. Make it something they do on a regular basis because reading is so important. It exercises the mind in such a way that cannot be done with, say, a movie or a video game. So yeah, today I just wanted to casually go through some of these books I have. These aren't all the ones I own that you're seeing here, and some of them I haven't actually read. In fact, I actually want to see if any of you guys have read them and can maybe give your thoughts. Please ignore the makeshift curtain here in the corner. That thing at the top broke. The room's supposed to be being done up anyway soon. And please ignore, of course, the cardboard I'm using to prop up the bookshelf with, which without this entire thing might topple over. It's also worth noting that a lot of these books I have already actually reviewed on the channel, and many of those videos are set to members only because nobody really watches them, so I might as well keep them separate. So yeah, I just wanted to take a look at a few of them. And where better to start than with Mario Puzo's The Godfather. Of course, now considered an all-time classic, mainly because of the movie. The book itself was already a bestseller and already had much hype before the film even came out. So much has been said about whether the book is better than the film or whether the film is better than the book. If you want my thoughts, I would say the two complement each other perfectly well. If you've seen the movie first, like I did, and then you read the book fills in so many gaps. It makes the film, which is already so rich, even richer. And I imagine if you've read the book first and then you watch the film actually improves the experience, puts faces to names in the book, and also gets rid of some of the more weirder storylines. There's a few little pulpy elements of Mario Puzo's The Godfather that Francis Ford Coppola wisely removed from the film. It's not the shortest book around. It's around almost 600 pages, and it's very entertaining. It's full of great characters, as you know. And the film, if you haven't read the book, the film is almost, what's the correct term to use here? Shot for shot, shall we say? It's almost a direct adaptation of the book, minus, of course, some of the more weirder plot elements, as I mentioned. These books are basically just for my kids, by the way, in case you're wondering. Always good for youngsters to learn to read from an early age. And here, this one is very interesting, I thought. So there's 3 Godfather sequels written by authors who are not Mario Puzo. So he wrote one called The Sicilian, which is a semi-sequel to The Godfather. It's not really concerned with the Corleones, but there's 3 direct follow-ups to Puzo's Godfather book, and none of them are written by Puzo. So first you have The Godfather Returns, which, as you can see, the cover for mine has been eaten or ripped off or something. This book I thought was not that great, to be honest. It had its moments, and most of the moments that I enjoyed related to parts that were cleared up from the original book or maybe the movie. Like, for example, they depict the way Salvatore Tessio was murdered. Obviously, it's this author's interpretation of the events, and I actually made a video on this on my YouTube channel as well, the way Salvatore Tessio died based on what this book says. And there's a few interesting things here and there, but I didn't really recognize the characters. Michael and Fredo and Tom and all of these characters, they acted so different in the book. The only thing that was the same was the name. And this follow-up, again written by the same author, Mark Weingartner, we just kind of compounded the issues in the first one. And there's characters who are just not interesting that are followed so much in both novels. Johnny Fontaine, for instance, who of course is a major character in the original book, but there's really no need to follow his story in so much detail because he's just not that interesting after the events of the original book. The last one I thought was just poor, really, to be honest. This one had its moments. This one was just kind of boring, and I was waiting for it to end. A review of each of these books and the original is available on the channel. That's not members only. Anybody can watch those. This one, written by Ed Falco, The Family Corleone. This one I thought was actually very enjoyable. I really enjoyed this book. Partly because, and it's also worth mentioning that this is based on an unpublished screenplay by Mario Puzo for A Godfather Part 4. So it has an air of legitimacy. I do wonder which bits of the book were from Puzo's screenplay and which were made up by the author. But either way, unlike the other two books, this is one where I could recognize the characters. And it took characters who were perhaps underutilized from previous books and it made them the main characters, basically. Mainly Luca Brasi, who is such a fascinating character and he's really expanded upon in this book, and they do justice to him. You know, obviously, sometimes you get prequel works. By the way, it's a prequel to the original Godfather. You get prequel works where they explain too much about certain characters and they ruin them. But this one did it very well. The olive oil wars, which are referenced in The Godfather, are covered in detail here. You have the origin story of Luca Brasi, as I mentioned. Sonny Corleone is a very important character. And it's taking place at a very interesting time in the life of the Corleone family. This one is very interesting. If I were to rank them, I would say the original is of course the best, then this one, then The Godfather Returns, and then The Godfather's Revenge. The first two I'd recommend, the second two, the ones written by Mark Weingartner, not so much. So let's see what else we got here. Right next to The Godfather, we have two other interesting mob works. So the first here is Wiseguy, written by Nicholas Pileggi. As it says on the cover, the book that inspired Goodfellas. Apparently Scorsese was sitting on set of The Color of Money, if I remember correctly, while he was reading this book, and then he phoned up Nicholas Pileggi and said to him, I've been waiting for this book my entire life, or my entire career. And Nicholas Pileggi said, I've been waiting for this phone call my entire career. And it's, as you can imagine, it's the life of Henry Hill told from his point of view. And it's very similar to Scorsese's Goodfellas, except of course there's a lot more detail in here, especially with regards to the scams and crimes that Henry Hill was doing, which is perhaps the most neglected aspect of the movie. I thought it was an interesting read, more in terms of the information I got from it. It was informative. It wasn't very entertaining, I have to say. I didn't really enjoy it, if that makes sense. It was more informative, as I said. The book is a bit of a dry read, you know, where Scorsese's film has all the weird, wacky camera angles and has music and the dialogue and all that kind of stuff. The book is kind of told in a very straightforward way, but it still is a, you know, very entertaining read. And if you want more information on the events of Goodfellas, at least from Henry Hill's point of view, who, let's remember, is apparently someone who did embellish a lot of facts, then it's worth checking out. This one's an interesting book, The Winter of Frankie Machine. The reason why I singled that out today is because this book was supposed to be Scorsese and De Niro, Robert De Niro's big re-team up after Casino. So about 15, 20 years, whatever it was, after Casino came out. Of course, De Niro and Scorsese were looking to make a film together. They hadn't done so in years. De Niro was, if I remember correctly, offered the role of Frank Costello in The Departed, but he had to turn it down because he was making The Good Shepherd at the time. He was also, if I remember correctly, offered the role of Bill the Butcher in Gangs of New York, but by the time they started making it, he was too old. And the one they settled on, the project they settled on, was this, The Winter of Frankie Machine, which is essentially about an old retired mob guy. As it says here, Frank is the guy, a late middle-aged ex-serf bum who runs a bait shack on the San Diego waterfront. Frank's also a hitman, well, a retired hitman. And I guess you could say it's a cliche story, and a hitman forced out of retirement, one last job. De Niro was the perfect age to play it. In fact, he could still play this role even now. It's about someone, if I remember correctly, coming into this guy's house, this guy Frank, and trying to kill him. And then Frank has to search deep into his past, contact many people from his old life to try and work out who wants him killed and why they want him killed and how he can stop it before it's too late. It's a very pulpy read. It's a very fun read. I did very much enjoy it. It's a very good book. But when it comes to Scorsese and De Niro re-teaming up, I can see it working. Scorsese isn't afraid to tackle pulp. Shutter Island felt like quite a pulpy film, a very kind of theatrical film, and I really enjoyed that movie. So I can see it working. But the story goes that De Niro, when he was doing his research for his role for the Winter Frankie machine, he ended up reading this book, I Heard You Paint Houses, by Charles Brandt. And when he read this, he said to Scorsese, no, this is the book we should be making. Now, of course, this is the book that The Irishman is based on. And it's essentially told from Sheeran's point of view. It's got direct quotes from him, and it's told from the point of view of the author himself, Charles Brandt. This is, again, a very enjoyable book. I read this for research purposes when I was making my videos before The Irishman came out. It's actually the book that got me back into reading. I used to love reading in school. Then I kind of fell out of love with it. Just didn't have the time. And now I love reading again. It's partly because of this book. And it's, people might say, okay, you know what? He was lying about a lot of stuff. He made things up. He didn't kill Crazy Joe Gallo. He didn't kill Jimmy Hoffa. I don't know what the truth is. I don't know what parts are lies, what parts are made up, what parts are not lies. But in terms of enjoyment, it's one of my favorite mob books. It's right up there with The Godfather, I think. I find it very enjoyable, a really good book, just in terms of entertainment. How true it is, I don't know. But it's very worth reading. And if you are someone who likes The Irishman and you want more of the backstory, then pick this up and read it. Especially in regards to Jimmy Hoffa and the union battles, which are some of the best parts of the book. They're really interesting, seeing how these unions fought against each other, and also the tricks that Jimmy Hoffa and his legal team played against their opponents in the courts. And a lot more backstories on the mobsters and different characters, and Angela Bruno, who obviously is in the film for about 5 minutes. So it's a very interesting book. This one here, by Don Winslow, it passed from Scorsese and De Niro's hands and went into Michael Mann's, if I remember correctly. And then it passed from Mann's hand into William Friedkin, the director of The Exorcist and The French Connection. And as of the time of the making of this video, it seems the book is, well, I don't know, in no man's land. It doesn't seem like there is any active attempt to get it on the big screen.